Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engage Podcast, to bring you today another great episode of Engage Podcast. But before I can get into that, if you're listening to this podcast for the very first time, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, go ahead and subscribe. That way, every Thursday, we will be on your phone waiting for you to listen. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. It's a win-win. Also, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and go over to our YouTube page as well. The link for that's down in the show notes. And over there, you can find so much cool content. We have book reviews, music reviews, leadership videos. We have sermon recordings. We have sermon live streams. Every Sunday at 11 a.m., we have our live stream that will be on our YouTube page that you can sit and watch at home. And you can worship God in the safety of your own home. There's just so much for you. And if you subscribe to that as well, every time we come out with a new video, you'll be the first one to be notified. So both things, this podcast and our YouTube page, if you subscribe, you will be rewarded by getting first access content to everything that we post. So it's pretty awesome. If you were a fan of our outside services that we did at Faith Presbyterian last summer, then guess what? You're in luck because we're back. That's it. We are doing it again starting in June. We're going to be outside again, and it's going to be so much fun, and I cannot wait to be outside again. It was so awesome last year, and I hope to see you there. So our guest today was a great guest. His name is Travis Martwinski. Now, I'm pretty sure I didn't say his last name right. So Travis, if you're listening, I apologize. But Travis Martwinski is, he's the type of guy that just fascinates me because I love people who, when they looked at what they wanted to do for a living, they chose high stressful jobs. And Travis is that kind of guy, right? So he just recently retired from a long career in working as the chief of operations for the Sharon Police Department. That's a pretty big job. But if that wasn't enough, he's also currently running for district judge here in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. I mean, just mind-blowing to me. The fact that the jobs that he has, the experience that he's had, just incredible. So needless to say, he was a great guest. We talk about so many great things. So no matter what you're interested in, we're going to be talking about it today on Engage Podcast. So give it up for our friend Travis Martwinski.
Back to Engage Podcast. We are so excited to see you all again. We hope you've had a great day and great week. I'm sitting here with Seth. How's Seth today?
Sounds good.
Seth is good, and we have a very special guest today, Travis Martwinski.
Correct.
Oh, man. All right, I worked hard on that bad boy. I nailed it.
Yes.
It's all in the hand gestures. Now, Travis is currently the captain of operations at the Sharon Police Department. And we're so glad you're here today. We can't wait to dig in, get to know you better, get to know what your future plans are. We're glad you're here today. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, it's an honor for us to have you. So we were on the phone last night, and we had a little connection that we're going to kick things off with. And the connection is who used to cut our hair. Now, how the scale of... Can I talk about your hair right now? Is it okay?
Not much there, but we can talk about it.
The days when you had hair.
Yes.
All right. So my uncle in Newcastle, Uncle Frank Antuano's Barbershop. So any of our locals, if you're from Newcastle, you're gonna know Frank Antuano's Barbershop. He literally cut everyone's hair in Newcastle.
Yep.
Okay, so
he sure did.
So he cut our hair.
Yes.
So what was that experience like going? Now this is an old-fashioned, off the boat Italian little barbershop.
Yes.
Give us an experience.
I grew up down in Newcastle, and when my wife and I first got married, we moved to Mahoneytown, and then we moved up to the Upper East Side. And Frank would cut my hair, and then when I had children, I started taking my kids to him as well until I got the job up here, and then it was obviously a little too far to drive. But Frankie was a trip. The place was tiny. It probably wasn't much bigger than this room. I think he had 2 seats.
Yep.
But he was the only one I ever saw in there cutting hair, and you had 2 styles. You had short and short.
That's right.
And no scissors. It was all with the clippers, and he did everyone in our family. He did my wife's family. That's how as a kid, my mom's cousin Sue would cut my hair. But as you get a little older and you want that professional style, my father-in-law turned me on to Frank, and went, for 5, 6 years, 7 years while I was still down there. We got pictures. My kid upset, crying. He's like 3 years old, 2 years old for his first haircut, and scared to death. But it was funny.
What a cool connection, and what a memory. That brings back tons of memories for me. It's funny, he mentions the 2 styles. So I'll tell this story, and I'm going to date myself here. I'm 25 for everyone listening out there. I prematurely grayed. So back in the day, they had these guys. I don't know if everything comes back in style. So guys would have these thing called tails, or rat tails. And if you're not familiar, you can Google that. I hope nothing inappropriate comes up. But it's basically a normal hair like this. And then behind, you would have this long strand. And it was almost like a point of pride how long you can let that thing grow. Well, I watched several times my uncle have a kid sit down, and when he would ask you what you want, because you just said he got 2 styles. It really didn't matter. It was just a question. It didn't matter. You were going to get what Uncle Frank got you, gave you that day. And I watched him pick up the very first thing. I watched him pick up the kid's rat tail after the instructions were, I don't care what you do with my hair, just don't touch my rat tail. And I would watch him pick the hair up, grab his scissors, and the first thing, cut it right off and throw it on the floor. Now, those were the days.
And that was the only time he used a scissor.
That's it. Those were the days, man.
Yeah.
So very cool. If you are out there and you're listening to this, and you by chance have your own experience at Frankie and Twano's Barbershop, drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your stories. So
Frank was a great guy, and my aunt, who is, I think, 10 years younger than me, married Frank's son, which cousin of yours. So it's full circle. Small communities, small towns, small world, I guess.
That's right. I just ran into Lena last week. So
my Aunt Lena.
Yeah, Aunt Lena.
That was difficult to call when I'm 17 years old, to call my aunt, who's like 7 or 8, Aunt Lena. But my grandfather always made me do it. So.
That's all right. So let me ask you this before we get into your hobbies and all that kind of stuff. We just told stories about, back in the day. What do you think so much has changed? What do you think changed culturally so much from that time to this time? What do you think has changed in our world, especially in America?
There's a lot of trying times right now, and I think a lot of it is a respect for authority, and just, you see, the last few days I've been in the school, they've been really great. The kids have been really great, but I think COVID had a lot to do with that, and there's not so many kids in the school. But I would hear these teachers, and they would say the disrespect that they would get from these students, which would have never been tolerated when we were children, because our parents would have not tolerated it. I think a lot of times now the parents are disengaged, and these phones seems to be the most important thing in any child's life. My kids are 27 and 24, so we were on the early, it was early, the phones, where they were so portable. And I remember having these discussions with my wife, like, when is the appropriate time to get a phone for my child? And you're the worst parent in the world, because all my friends have phones, but you won't give me one. But with my oldest, I think we held out till he was about 12, but then we caved with the younger one. So they're so preoccupied. Society is so fast now. Parents, they're doing their best they can, but it's a tough world right now, and there's a lot of strife and a lot of animosity. The country divided based on politics, based on race, based on gender, and I don't know how we get around that to back to a normal. I think spiritually should be the way that has to be the way. The churches they're failing. They're not failing, but the population is dwindling of people who are going to church nowadays.
Yeah, I think there was just a stat around Easter that this is the least attended church-wise at Easter in American history.
I believe it.
But I agree with you. You talk about respect, and respect starts in the home. It's strange to me that we want to, as society and parents, it's like you're putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging wound by talking about things that are happening outside of the home. To me, things start in the home. And the fifth commandment addresses that. It says, honor your father and mother. It doesn't end there. The point of the commandment isn't that it ends in the home. It starts in the home.
Right.
So if you can't honor the two people that love you the most and are closest to you the most, then you're going to leave the house and dishonor every other authoritative figure in your life, whether that's your teacher, an officer, whatever that person, that role is of authority. You're going to fail there because you weren't taught to respect the people that were closest to you.
Right.
And in terms of the phone, it's a double-edged sword, because you're a bad parent if you don't give it out, but at the same time, the moment you do, there's no going back.
No.
So if you introduce those handheld devices to your children and they're 3, there's no going back. If you do it at 12, there's no going back. But the other side is eventually they're going to be introduced to them.
Yeah, sure.
So now you have that tension of when or how do you regulate it. So
regulating it is very hard. I don't even think it's possible, quite truthfully. Once the kids are out of the house so much and they're involved in so many things that I don't even know that you could put the proper filters on phones to keep kids from seeing things they shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah. And it introduces kids to things prematurely.
Oh, sure.
Just because you have knowledge, it doesn't mean you have wisdom. Like, I can borrow your knowledge, but I can't borrow your wisdom.
Right.
See, that's the difference, right?
Oh, sure.
I can borrow 2 + 2 is 4, but I can't borrow the wisdom to navigate life.
Right.
And that's what's scary.
I say this all the time. When I was 18, my dad didn't know anything, but boy, the older I get, the smarter he gets.
Right.
It's true.
With age comes wisdom, for sure. Life experience is important.
And so I remember doing some research in this very topic, and one of the things that was pointed out to me was in all of human history, which that's a big word. We say that phrase a lot, all of human history. But this is actually true in all of human history from the beginning of time, Adam and Eve standing in the garden to 30 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Who were the smartest people in the rooms? Adults.
The elders.
And so if a kid wanted to know something, where'd they go?
The elders.
Right, because you offered knowledge, but you offered wisdom. When people have problems today, your grandparents or you, where do you go?
Me? I go to my parents.
No, I understand. But where do people go? They go and ask their little kids.
Yeah.
How do you figure this out?
Sure.
How can I do this?
Right.
This is the first time in human history that the mature adult is now seeking out the little child for advice and wisdom. It's scary.
Sure it is.
Well, it's not only that, but if you look at the schools today, if a kid gets in trouble, the parent takes the side of the kid, not the parent. When I was growing up, it didn't have to be a teacher. Like, any adult.
Sean Walters would show up.
Well, it was not only that, but it was like any adult's word was over my word. If me and a teacher had a confrontation or whatever, and I got sent to the principal's office, there was no story I could ever tell that would make my dad go down and yell at the teacher. The dad came down and he yelled at me.
Right.
And
even if you were right.
Even if I was right, but it didn't matter though. Like
Yeah.
Any adult, a hobo could show up and be like, "Hey, he stole my cardboard box I was living in," and my dad would just be like, "Get in the house." Like, it wouldn't even be about the fact that it was a hobo. It was any adult's
right. I got you.
word.
Sure.
Right.
But even that, just that has changed to now. It's not only are they going to the kids to help me figure this out. Now they see their kid as they are the center of everything.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you walk on eggshells around your kid, and it's like your child isn't. It's not a psychopath. It's a kid, you know.
And so I guess a visual would be the child is driving the bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and a lot of times they are.
yeah, that's scary.
It is very scary.
So you mentioned going. I said, where do you go for advice? And you said your dad, right? So who are your influences, and tell us the reason why. You know, what are the things of significance that you'd say they taught you?
In life in general, or
Life,
speaking in the job?
No, life in general.
I've had some lifelong friends that were teachers and coaches, and and obviously parents, and growing up, I always looked at my dad. My dad's work ethic was where I get my work ethic is from my dad. I don't ever remember my dad missing work. I remember him, working long hours, and he worked at the Youth Development Center in Newcastle. So what he did was, and first of all, he's a Vietnam vet. He's a Purple Heart Vietnam vet. He was dealt a bad hand in life early. He was shot significantly. It caused him complications the rest of his life. I mean, he's still alive, but it's still to this day causing him complications. But he never complained. He worked very hard. When he wasn't working at work, he was working at the house, and so his work ethic is where, I think where I got mine. Calling off sick, really, that's not an option for me. I just, you'd go to work. I think leadership wise and leading a police department and having guys follow you. I learned that from sports. I was a 3-sport player in high school, and I had great coaches, long-term coaches. Frank Bonjavingo was my football coach. He coached at that school for over 30 years. Billy McNeese was my basketball coach, a 30-year coach. My baseball coach was Jan Budai. As a child in elementary school, you knew who your coach was going to be in high school. That doesn't happen anymore. I, to this day, still call Bill McNeese. He's been a mentor of mine, and just an all-around great guy. But the work ethic, the leadership, commitment to family. My mom and dad are still married. My wife's mom and dad are still married, both over 50 years. I just turned 50. My wife and I will be married 30 years this year.
Congratulations.
That's a milestone.
That's awesome.
But the commitment to family, we learned it from our family, and that's where you pick those things up. So, I think leadership and hard work and commitment, those are the people that kind of groomed my life.
That's interesting about the coaching thing. Having those same people. It's like that God places in your life. How important are mentors, do you think, for young people?
They mean a lot, especially from them ages of 11, 12 to 20. You can go. Those are the ages you go awry, and if you don't have good solid foundation in the home, you'd better have good solid foundation outside the home, or you will. That this is why police have. This is why I have the job I do, because a lot of people don't follow the law, and they cause some problems in society.
I have a very interesting thing I want to tie into this. I can say without a doubt that I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for the mentors that God had sent me through my life. All critical times, and all different in their own way, like just exactly what I needed. Then one would phase out, and there would be a new one, exactly what I needed. But I remember reading in a book the book is called The Fabric of Faithfulness. And it was a research done to see why, this was the point of the book, was that the author wanted to know why kids who were raised in church, they're there every Sunday school, whatever, the whole 9 yards, how they get to a certain point and they walk away from the church, versus other kids that were raised the same way continue that in their life. We want to know, like, why are some kids that were raised the same way?
Right.
Why are ones still plugged in and other ones are walking away? And one of the things that I remember from this book, and it applies to everything, and it literally, you just said it. He said that one of the things that the kids had that remained is they had another model in their life other than mom and dad that modeled the importance of that. So, for example, they had an influential youth pastor, or an influential pastor, or influential Sunday school teacher. It was someone else that they plugged into outside of mom and dad. It was like an echo of what mom and dad were
Right.
saying and teaching.
Yeah.
You know, it's around that age that mom and dad, you joked earlier,
Yeah.
well, they don't know anything, right?
Right.
But other people now know things. So what he said is, as a parent, no matter what you want the kids to continue in, whether it's church or whatever, find role models outside of yourself that'll mirror you.
Yeah.
So whether that's a soccer coach, a Sunday school teacher, whatever it is. And he said good parents find other good quality people to put around their kids.
Sure.
That's
It
mentoring.
makes perfect sense to me.
Isn't that powerful?
Truthfully, it is.
And if you just, without kind of even knowing that, look back to that with naming your parents, your coaches, all those people. And even to this day, you call them.
Yeah.
So one of mine was Pastor Dave. He was a very influential youth pastor at First Alliance Church when a lot of us were going to church youth group and things like that. We never had done that before. We accepted Christ in our life. It was a very important moment for us. To this day, which I can't believe it. And if you're listening out there, this is for you, Pastor Dave. He texts me every Sunday morning before church. He's the only person in my life. And I'm not only am I happy that he does that, I'm astonished.
Yeah.
This was 20 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
He texts me every Sunday morning. I delete everything. I have like that OCD.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're gone. You're out of my life. I keep them all.
Yeah.
Every Sunday, there's something from him praying for you. May the power of God move in you today. You know, let the Holy Spirit shine through you.
Sure.
And that is amazing to think that he wakes up and he thinks to do that.
Well, I think maybe you touched his life as much as he's touched yours.
If you're listening, Pastor Dave, can you verify that? Go ahead and drop a comment.
That's awesome. I had a question, but then I completely lost it after that. It was a moving story. I like that.
Yeah?
I liked it a lot.
See, I'm a human after all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we should all challenge ourselves to be a Pastor Dave to somebody else. The fact that longevity, you know, and it's important to have a close relationship with someone over a period of time. Because again, that's something that's going away with the digital age and everything else, is that, you know, relationships, friendships don't last as long. You know, what was the Puritans used to call fair weather friends who would drift away once the weather got bad or once things got bad. You need to have those friends that are going to be in it for the long haul. And, you know, it's great that you had Pastor Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So let's turn it to the lighter side. This is the question Seth was going to ask. I know that because I just read his mind. What do you do for fun when you unplug? What are you doing? What does Travis do for fun?
For years, I coached Little League and high school baseball, and that was really my source of enjoyment. And it was not so much just coaching my kids, but it was coaching other kids. Prior to that, I liked the garden. But once my kids were involved in sports, there was no time for the garden. So I took that off for about 15 years. I've started to go back to that a little bit. But, you know, coaching was an area that I really excelled in, that I was making a difference. The job is stressful. You know, there's no question about it. The things that I've seen in life and the events that I've had to deal with can weigh on you. So you have to do something. You have to get out, and coaching was it. Taking up golf a little bit. I'm going to have a little more time here after April 30th when I retire. I don't have a whole lot of hobbies. I mean, I'm a workaholic. I'm the first guy in the building. I'm the last one to leave. I've worked probably every day, 10 hours a day, and I have for 17 years. So, but that's the leadership quality that my men see, you know, and you can ask almost all of them, and some may like some of the things I do, some may not like some of the things I do, but they'll always say that he is always there for us, and anytime we need something, he tries to get it for us, and he works. So it's going to be a strange transition next week when I don't have to get up and go to work on Monday morning. I'm going to miss those guys terribly. But it's, you know, I know I've I've accomplished everything I need to do on the job, and we're kind of moving in a different direction now.
I get the feeling he's going to have one of the largest gardens in the neighborhood.
I have a little city plot, so I don't have a whole lot of room for the garden.
That's awesome.
Did your family have gardens growing up?
My dad had a giant. And the funny thing is, I hated that garden.
Why?
Because he always made me go out and weed it.
Oh, really?
Oh, it was a source of just aggravation for me. But, my dad didn't know anything when I was 18.
Yeah.
Now he's the smartest guy I know.
Right.
It's a source of enjoyment. You bring something to life. It bears fruit. Last year I put in 2 cherry trees that are going to be fruit bearing. I put in some grapevine. I mean, it's crazy. You go full circle. You turn into your father.
Can I tell you
those commercials are us.
Can I tell you what he's thinking right now? Oh, you guys are old. I know that. I found a thing online. It was at Buell Park, and it said like cleanup day. I write it to him. I say, hey. I said, this looks like fun. He's like, how old are you? Do you think that going to Buell Park and cleaning up is fun? I'm like, I didn't even respond. I was like, yeah, I am old.
That's it.
We're telling old man stories over here.
Yeah.
Well, so one could say that technically you never gave up gardening because you just went from gardening plants to gardening people and people who, being the Pastor Dave in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And so looking back on your career, with everything that you've been through, you've experienced, that you've seen, mistakes you've made, everything else, what have you learned the most? And as you sit here today, what is that like? What are some of those things that make you today?
I've always had a passion for this job, and I've always looked at this job as my job was to suppress crime in the city and make it safer for my neighbors. And I live in the city, and I sent my children to public school, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. And I'm not moving from this city. I love that. I love our community. I love having the neighbors right next door and, socializing and sitting on the front stoop. But it's been, what makes me, I guess, part of me was always been what I did for a living. I've investigated probably close to 30 homicides. So, 25, 30 times I've had to go to my neighbors and tell them that their son was murdered or, their child was killed in a car wreck or, those things aren't easy, but someone's got to do it. And I'm glad it was me that got to do it. I would see some of the younger guys on these scenes and they're in shock, but they're required to do, you got to work. We're not here to, you have to do a job. We have to secure a scene. We have to preserve evidence. We have to solve these things. This person needs justice. And so, my life has been consumed with police work. My life has been consumed with, in the investigative side of things. That's always been my strongest suit. The administrative side was never fun to me. Doing schedules and stuff like that. That just, I never got joy out of that. It was always being out there in the community, making a difference, helping people who were victims of crime, and I think it really, really hit me 2018 when my own nephew was murdered down in Newcastle. And from that point, and I loved the way they did things. Newcastle PD treated us fabulous. They kept us in the loop. They briefed with us afterwards, after the arrest was made. And that was something I didn't really do as a homicide detective or running the bureau. I never really considered the family. My job was preserve the scene, collect evidence, solve this crime. And but when it gets on the other foot, it's a big deal. So, I mean, we changed. I changed the entire the way we did things from there on out. It was, obviously family's not first. Though you can't put the family first. The first is solving that homicide, but we always now keep the family in the loop. We have a debriefing with the family. We let them know as much as we can of how it is, where we got from A to Z, and what they can expect after this. And it didn't hit home until you have a tragedy in your own when you're on the other side of the fence, and that really changed my philosophy on things.
Yeah, you learned, it's the difference between the task and the relationship. And it's easy to just focus on the task, but the relationship side, it's the bedside manners.
Yeah.
Just like at the hospital.
Sure.
You can be the best surgeon in the world, but if the family's out there sweating it for 12 hours,
Right.
it's good to peek your head out every once in a while and say, here's where I'm at. It looks like it's 90%, we're going to be okay. Because in the absence of information, we make up our own.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So that's good. But I think that says a lot about you, that you're a teachable person, that you're self-aware enough to say, hey, this is something that I can get better at, and we're going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
That says a lot about you.
Yeah, that's always been, and you can ask my detectives, and that's always been, we always roundtabled. Any major case, we sat down, we roundtabled. And sometimes I went into the room thinking this is the way we were going to go. But then I talked to my 3 detectives, and they all think we should be going another way. And I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong on this one. These guys all got a lot of experience too. So let's, a lot of times we go there. I'll go their way. Now the ultimate decision is mine at the end of the day. But we solved the murder because of my junior detective, and I was dead set against what he wanted to do. But he gave us he presented it to me in such a way that the other 2 detectives were like, this might work. And it worked.
It worked.
It worked. So you got to be willing to listen to the people around you, because you're not always the authority.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's an act of leadership in itself. It's humility.
Sure.
Right? Because if you can't listen to the people around you to give you ideas, then that's either an ego problem or you're around the wrong people.
Right.
So
yeah, and my job, there's no place for ego.
Well, one of the things we like to ask people is, right behind Seth's head is this smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. And, it's something that, you hear that kind of thing a lot, but that's about, going out and dealing with the storms of life. So not everything has went perfectly for you, obviously, right?
Oh, no.
So talk to us about failure. Is there anything you've done, that you failed in but learned, something like that?
Oh, we fail every day. I think I've made mistakes, as a patrolman. I've made mistakes as a detective. I've made mistakes as the captain of operations. Hopefully you have that good team around you that your mistake isn't so costly that you lose an investigation or a trial. But it's everything is fluctuates. Everything's different. You go into a scene or a situation, you do it 100 times. None of them are the same. So you have to be willing to adapt and reevaluate and step back at times. I know our younger guys, and I tell them, I said, when you got 1 to 5 years on the job, this is all you see, what's in front of you. Then maybe you get promoted and you realize, I have some liability in this thing now. Now I'm seeing here. Because now it's me and the 4 guys I'm in charge of. But then you get promoted to captain or chief, and that responsibility for 1 guy turned to 5 guys. Now it turned to 20 guys, and now it's 30 guys, plus a whole city.
That's true.
I was very, very concerned, and my chief both, during the George Floyd incident, when we had the local protest. I was on vacation. And my chief was out of town, and we started getting this information that there's going to be a big protest in downtown Sharon. And, I probably texted with my city manager and my chief 70, 80 times that day and make phone calls, come back. We both come back from vacation. And luckily, we had a plan, and I had a plan. I reached out to the protesters, the organizers. We talked to them ahead of time to see what they needed, where they thought, and they didn't want us involved, but they were appreciative that we were there, that we shut roads down for them, that we let them, do their protest and spew whatever it is they were angry about. And it worked very well in Sharon. And then it went from Sharon to Farrell, and then it went from Farrell to Hermitage, and there were some problems up at Hermitage, and it was more, because of, placement of vehicles and stuff, just the small stuff that they didn't think about. That put their cruisers in an area where they shouldn't have been, and they had a little skirmish up there, which led to a couple more days of protest, and but it's planning, organizing, communication. And I didn't know there was 3 people that were organizing this, and I didn't know any of them. But I, talked to every one of them that morning and gave them what they needed, and they were satisfied with that. And most of the crowd was peaceful, and it worked out really well. But if you're not willing to make those calls and those phone, and have those conversations, things could have went. Our downtown community was very worried too. You had all these business owners that were sitting down there in front of their stores because you're seeing what's happening on the news, these cities burning and businesses being smashed, and there was 300 or 400 people there. But we accommodated them the best we could. We gave them what they wanted, and it worked out pretty well. And I've had a relationship with the one female ever since, and she's not a pro-police girl by any stretch of the imagination, but she calls me quite a bit, and if there's a problem that she anticipates going to happen in Sharon, or she'll let me know, hey, we're coming, we're going to be loud and we're going to be inconvenienced, but we're coming, and she gives me at least that heads up to where we can mobilize and make sure that they're safe and not run over in the street, and that there's no problems that occur. So
wow. See what that little olive branch did.
Sure. Sure. Wow. No, I'm sure she's grateful that I communicate with her, and I'm certainly grateful that she'll communicate with me.
That's awesome. That's great. So, you hear when people talk about being an astronaut or being a pilot, you always hear that phrase: you have to be made of the right stuff, or you have to be of the right stuff. What would you say is the right stuff for people who want to work in your profession?
Well, you have to be willing. You have to be willing to go into situations that are dangerous and deadly. First of all, you got to have the right frame of mind. You can't be an authoritarian. You have to be an authoritarian, but you can't be an authoritarian all the time. We have a few guys that struggle with that. They're always the boss and they're always in charge, and you know how that comes across. When you tell these guys, you got to remember when you're going to this problem, and it may be the most small problem of the day, but it's those 2 people's biggest problem that is going on. So if you're not willing to go there, listen, separate them, try to moderate, it can escalate. And I think that's where some of our police fell into the escalation. And I think people expect more from police than is reasonable, but that's part of the job too. You're going to get yelled at. People aren't going to like you, but you have a job to do. You have to secure that scene. You have to make sure people are safe, and you have to solve whatever crime that it is that's being reported to you. It's your job. It's what we pay you. Some people, aren't cut out for that.
So, you talk about like having the right mindset, having the right head on your shoulders, and being able to enter yourself into these dangerous situations. Is this something that you find comes natural with the people who do well in your field, or is this something that people learn over time?
No, it's definitely a learned behavior. Look, I am in no way, shape, or form the same officer I was in 1994. I'm an Italian Polak from Newcastle. I have a temper. I've been in fights. I've been on the other side of the law as a kid growing up. But and it's tough. They give you a badge, they give you a gun, they tell them everybody's supposed to do what you say. Now go out there and enforce the law. And when you get some pushback, it's natural. You're human to be angry, to push back. And as you get older, again, those blinders. As you get older and you see the liability and the responsibility you have, and now you have a wife, now you have children, now you have a house. That can all be in peril if you make the wrong mistake, do the wrong thing. So it's maturity and learning how to deal with adversity.
That's it. Learning how to deal with adversity.
So I think you mentioned earlier that you see younger detectives come in, and so would you say humility is one of those key things that you see as you're watching them flourish? Again, kind of like a gardening thing. You're seeing a plant, sprout, and then you see it come to fruition. You're seeing guys come in as fresh, brand new, and then you're seeing them develop and kind of become seasoned. Would you say that humility is that one thing that they learn as they go through and they kind of get better in their becoming more seasoned in this job?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it is special. I have a detective that, if he isn't already, he will be probably the greatest interviewer that I've ever witnessed. And he was a knucklehead as a patrolman, and he'll tell you that first thing. And it's been really special to watch his progression. Now, he's been on the job, you know, several years now, over 12, 13, 14 years. But, you know, it's always fun to watch these guys progress and become a better police officer and then a better detective. And, you know, the guy who's going to be replacing me, he's my senior detective when I retire, or he was my senior detective. We made some shuffles in the department when my Captain Johnson retired. They moved me out of the detective bureau back to the patrol side to square a few things out over there. So my senior detective became a captain, and he's been running the detective bureau. And you know, he's been wonderful too. He's
That's awesome.
He's got such good preparation. And you know, he evaluates things, and he's got that obsessive compulsive disorder that you need.
Monk.
You know, you need it. You know, I mean, there are certain things. You know, I'm big on the whiteboard. You know, and some of the guys don't like the whiteboard, but I'm big on the whiteboard because once I put it up there, I won't forget about it, and I know that we'll get it done. And you know, he's the same way. You gotta, you know,
sounds like someone else I know.
So. But,
Captain Claudius over here.
Listen, if it's on the board, you won't forget it. And you know, we that's part of the debriefing on a major case. You have a major case. You got, you know, everybody's doing their own thing. We're getting all this information and intel flowing in. And at the end of the day, you know, as I'm running a command post, I may have detectives and corporals and sergeants and patrolmen out there. They're coming in individually over 20, 30 hours, telling me I did this. So I put on the board. So. You get that done, and you're able to kind of decompress, come back the next day or 3 days later, however long you've been out, and then you just start looking. All right, what did we do? Where are we at? Let's start putting a punch list.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Tons.
To your job, and that's why I use the whiteboard. But the other thing is genius is this: it doesn't. You can use your brain for other things.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember anything.
Right.
I tell my brain is free because it's on the board. I don't have to go, wait, what did you say to me? I don't have to do that because it's right there.
Yeah.
So we want to be mindful of time, but let's get into this. You mentioned retirement a handful of times, but you're not retiring. You got something else in the future.
Yes.
You are running for magisterial district judge of Sharon and Sharpsville.
I am.
That's exciting.
It is exciting, and it's a little scary because, you know, for years I've kept myself out of the newspaper. I've kept myself out of the limelight. You know, I wasn't the public information officer. It's hard to do your job and do these investigations if you're, you know, everybody knows who you are. So, you know, a lot of times you try to keep things quiet, low profile. So now I'm throwing myself out there, and that's not been easy. You know, it's not easy to brag about yourself. That's been my toughest thing to do. You know, I know that I am good at what I do, and I know that I probably have more experience in what I do now than probably any detective in Mercer County history. Just based out of longevity and based out of the crime volume that we have in Sharon. I was approached by a judge about a year and a half ago, who told me that this seat may be coming open, that he thought I'd be a fabulous candidate for it. My wife and I bantered back and forth for about 6 months, you know, before we made the decision. And believe me, we made this decision. You know, she's as big a part of this as I am. She has been the most fabulous police wife in the history of all police.
Because again, I don't want to go out into too much of a splinter, but just real briefly, that's its own calling in itself, right? That's difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but she has never second-guessed us. She has never complained that I'm not home. You know, she knows what my schedule is, and she knows if I don't call or I don't come home, it might be 3 days. And she's been good with that forever. So, you know, looking at retirement, she was excited, but this job calls for on-call and being available, and you know, it took a little bit of convincing, but I think she saw that I really wanted to do it, and she's my spouse and my partner, and she gave me the thumbs up, so we're all in.
That's cool. That's nice to hear that kind of relationship you both have. So, so what is it that actually inspired you then to say, I'm at the green light. We're green lighting this. Like, what is it that inspired you to become a judge?
I knew that my time as a police officer was nearing. And I love our community. I love my city. I love the Shenango Valley. I moved from Newcastle in 1994, and you could never pay me to go back. My brother was the opposite. There's two types of people from Newcastle: those that can't wait to leave, and those who can't wait to come back. I was the can't wait to leave guy. I was going to Texas to play baseball. From the time I was 6 years old. You'll never see me again, Mom. But besides that, so it keeps me. That job is very busy. And people don't understand how busy the on-call, the DJ is. I understand it because, I call Dennis Songerd every hour of the day and night for the last 11 years. We've signed search warrants in his living room, on his boat, at the golf course, in McDonald's parking lot, in Muscarella's parking lot. Wherever he's at and I need it, all right, I'll meet you here. So
no matter where you go in Hermitage, there's been a warrant signed in that spot.
That's it. And Judge Songer knows how busy they are. Red McMahon was a very influential man in my life. As a judge, he was the DJ when I started, and I learned so much from both of these guys. And besides Judge McMahon and Judge Songer, and obviously the women that work there, no one understands how busy that court is, except for the most part, other than the police, because we need them.
Very interesting.
Wow. Just because we've talked to so many different judges and things like that, just that whole world to me, it's opened it up, and it's also made me realize that I didn't know anything about what judges do or anything like that. So just the whole, just the level of stress that goes with that job is just insane to me. And
these judges are different because these judges are on call. The common pleas court I'll make reference to the common pleas court and the common sense court. And there's a reason lawyers are not being a lawyer is not a requirement for the magisterial district judge. That's a common sense court. They want the common man deciding when you two have a problem. They want your neighbor to figure it out. If they wanted lawyers there, they'd have made that a qualification or requirement for it. So it's that court is. They put a lot of work on that court as well, because if you need something at 4:00 in the afternoon, you're not getting it from that court. You're getting it from the magisterial court. If there's a lady beaten and she needs a PFA at 9:00 at night, that's not going to be a common pleas court judge coming out. That's going to be the district judge coming out. If there's a homicide and there's exigent circumstances and a nighttime search is needed, that's not going to be a common police judge coming out at 2 a.m. That's a magisterial district judge coming out. So they do a lot of the same things, but they're very, very much different as well.
Yeah, this would suit you better on hands, practical knowledge. You have so much. Knowledge and experience with working with people,
Right.
So that sounds like it's right up your alley. I wish you all the best. But we do have one last question.
Okay.
So we like to ask this at the very end of our podcast, and it would be this. So let's say one day, let's say in your retirement day, you're walking into your last day at work, and you happen to magically run into a 20-year-old Travis standing there. What would you say to him? What advice would you give?
Well, it's my son works for the police department now.
I did not know that.
Yes, my oldest son has been with the department for 2 years now, almost. So in effect, that is that's 27-year-old Travis. And I tell him to always try to do what's right. Always carry your head up high. See the bigger picture in this field of work. Don't try to stay away from that tunnel vision. The guys that I work with, the senior guys, they tell me, he is way ahead of his time. You know, like they said, like I had one guy tell me yesterday, like when we read his reports, it's like he called you that night and asked how he should handle this, and he's only got 1.5 years, 2 years on the job. So, you know, I think, you know, being a young officer is trying. There's a lot, and it's not the same as it was when I was a young officer.
Sure.
It's much different, but you know, you have to be focused on this job. You can't go through this job as a job. It's a career. It's a lifestyle, and you know, that's been my blessing, I guess. Is I've been there 27 years, and there's not a single day that I woke up in the morning and didn't want to go to work. So
That's awesome.
I know I picked the right job and I picked the right employer.
Yeah, good for you. Well, listen, this has been a huge privilege to have you on the Engage podcast. I know I speak for Seth as well.
Oh, yeah.
And all the listeners out there. I know you're going to be enlightened and blessed by this. Travis, we wish you all the best. And if you're out there and you've been blessed by this podcast, drop us a comment. And this is Anthony Clauditis here at Faith Prez, signing off for the week. We hope you have an awesome week, and we look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you so much. Pleasure was mine.